The 1980s was a decade worthy of its name. It stood for a span of time with a unifying, coherent philosophy, which we all more or less shared. In the 80s, it was morning in America.
Greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works.
And morning in America sounded good, but proved to be a false dawn, fueled by junk bonds and government debt. And when the market crashed, the junk dealers on Wall Street began to look a lot like the crack entrepreneurs, devastating the inner cities. The 1980s represented a huge U-turn for a lot of people, and a descent into a crack cocaine-induced nightmare from which many will never awake. Something happened in America in the 1980s, something not yet fully understood, but seen in outline by almost everyone. The growth of a multi-billion-dollar drug trade with the power to create narco-democracies everywhere its tentacles spread. And they spread a lot of places, even here. In the land where the palm trees kiss the tangerine sunsets 365 days in a row, Los Angeles, California. So we begin our story of the drugging of America here in Los Angeles. Hello, and welcome to Conspiracy, The Secret History. My name is Daniel Hopsicker, and I'll be your guide tonight on our journey to the secret heartbeat of America. We're in Los Angeles because what happened in Los Angeles happened in hundreds of other American cities in the 80s. But because it's Los Angeles, it happened bigger. Everything is bigger here. The money, the cars, the houses, the drugs, especially the drugs. Until recently, Los Angeles looked to many observers like the capital of the future. Then drugs began to destroy whatever social stability existed here. Admittedly, never much. This is a company town, a factory town, the manufacturing home of America's second leading export, the moving word, movies. Then crack came to town and everything changed. The results are everywhere around us. Every one of these faces is an MIA in the longest and most costly war this country has ever fought. A war that's already lasted twice as long as Vietnam. A war that cost us way over $16 billion a year, even though nobody thinks we've got a prayer of winning it. Of course, the name of this war is as familiar to every American as the names of our family, friends, and neighbors that have been lost in it. It's called the war on drugs. Tonight we're going to see evidence that it just might be an utter sham. Since crack came to town in the middle 80s, there have been persistent reports that the Contras and the CIA were somehow involved in it. So we begin our story about drugs in the American way in an unlikely place, here in San Jose, California, with the controversial series Dark Alliance, the story behind the crack explosion in the San Jose Mercury News, written by Gary Webb. His series linked the explosive growth in the market for crack cocaine to the shadowy funding of the Contras back in the middle 80s. Remember? Iran-Contra, selling guns to the Ayatollah.
Incentives to make that February transaction work. And the attractive incentive for me was the one he made, that residuals could flow to support the Nicaraguan resistance.
That was the Iran part of the Iran-Contra equation. Many people felt it scandalous to be selling weapons to people who were directly responsible for the deaths of 251 of our fellow countrymen in Lebanon. A few even called it treasonous. Webb's story raised the frightening picture of out-of-control elements of our nation's covert intelligence agencies peddling drugs like an army of Ivy League superflies. In places like Los Angeles, the effects are still being felt. And it's on these city streets that the drugs, the crack, ended up. The gangs in Los Angeles distributed crack cocaine to over 110 American cities that had never seen or heard of the drug before. And today, 10 years after the Nicaraguan Contra war is over, the crack is still here. Today, cynicism over this fact in the African American community is, to say the least, widespread.
To be black in America, we the janitors. So black folks grow up knowing stuff. And so we've been knowing this. I mean, we say it in our nice little way where we say we don't have planes. We can't laundry money. You know, it's hard for a black person to get a check cashed in their own bank. And so how we going to laundry drug money? And so what's amazing to us and what makes us feel good is white America now is beginning to see what we've been knowing all along.
I was catapulted into this issue because of my shock and outrage at the idea that government could have anyway been involved with the trafficking of drugs in this country. I think it is one of the most outrageous kinds of undermining of the citizens of this country that could have ever occurred.
So tonight, we're asking questions about the almost taboo subject of the drugging of America. Who profits? Who's responsible? Who benefits? Follow the money went the refrain during Watergate. Tonight, that's what we're going to do. Drugs are an audible pulse, throbbing right beneath the surface of the soundtrack of our life and times. The business is so big you can even hear it if you listen closely enough.
Into the distance, a river of black, stretched to the point of no turning back.
Tonight, we're going to tell you a story about the big bull elephant called the drug trade that squatted hard on certain parts of our country during the 1980s. You'll see what happened to people who were ordinary citizens until the whirlwind of drug trafficking scooped down and devoured everything in its path. Like Linda Ives, whose son Kevin was brutally murdered and then left to be dismembered by a speeding death train on a sultry August night in the Arkansas of 1987. The boys' murders have come to be called the train deaths. Near these tracks, 2 young high school boys were murdered after witnessing a drug drop, which, if you're not up on the lingo, is basically a place where on regular runs a plane flies over a designated spot like on these tracks, and drugs and sometimes money are parachuted down. The murder has become the most famous unsolved mystery in the country, but most of the mystery has gone out of it for a crusading mother who lost a child.
If you'd lived through what I've lived through, you would know that U.S. drug policy is not just say no, it's just fly low.
And there's this woman, Jean Duffy, a no-nonsense Arkansas prosecuting attorney who headed up a federally funded drug task force, getting a little too close to solving the boys' murders till she was run out of state in fear for her life.
My opinion has been involved is a CIA, perhaps a CIA rogue operation conducted by CIA operatives to smuggle drugs into the United States from South America, specifically using Barry Seal's drug smuggling operation in Mena.
And this man, Adler Berryman Seal, the most successful drug smuggler in American history. He was the most famous cocaine buccaneer in an era that abounded with them, most famous by a mile. And this is the man who tracked him to his home lair, Russell Welch, a criminal investigator for major crimes for the Arkansas State Police, whose no-nonsense investigation of smuggler Seal brought down upon him a ferocious and coordinated wrath that cost him his career, his health, and almost his life when he was sprayed in the face with military-grade anthrax, one of the deadliest viruses known on the planet.
Sheriff Fred Neblick, and I don't remember the date, I've got it in my notes, was walking past me one day behind the courthouse in Mena and stopped me and told me that he had information that Bob Dole had sent somebody to the Mena airport to look into the allegations that were being made at that time to see if it was going to have an impact on George Bush's upcoming bid for president.